Hello there, I'm the Utter Crisp and I'm here to follow up on a promise. Earlier this year, when I made my video on the Steam Summer Sale, I said I'd be more than happy to cover more large-scale sale events should it be received well by you guys, and heck, you responded. As such, here are a handful more recommendations of mine, this time for the 2023 Steam Autumn Sale. Once again, these games will be ordered in terms of steepest to lightest discount, and I'll only be featuring one game per series. Some of these games have already been covered on this channel in one way or another. If so, I'll be sure to provide links to the appropriate videos in the description below. With all that said, pull up a chair, grab your cup of coffee, and let's mosey on through some sweet deals. Here we have an absolute staple of PC gaming, and one of the most enthralling games that the platform has to offer. The late, brilliant John Total Biscuit Bain called this his favourite game for many years, and I can totally see why. I actually discovered this game because of a video that he put out a long time ago that I'll link below in the video description. Deus Ex is a game that, whilst being experienced throughout multiple handcrafted levels, still offers absolute freedom. It's a game in which you can simply run and gun, mowing down every unfortunate member of whichever conspiratorial organisation you happen to be facing down at that moment, or by taking a more delicate approach, using stun darts and concussive grenades and disabling cameras to remain a ghost in the shadows. It is the game that inspired many others within the immersive sim genre, like Dishonored, which I've talked about on this channel previously. It is an older game, but I believe that there are extensive mods to bring it back up to date with more modern standards, starting with resolution fixes and the like. For its current price, you truly can't go wrong with an absolutely indispensable piece of video game history. The Dragon Age series has a tumultuous past to say the least. Everybody loves the first one, hates the second, and no one can really agree on whether the third one is actually any good or not. I personally think Dragon Age Inquisition is a solid game, but buried underneath a whole lot of needless padding. Regardless, we're talking about Origins today, in which the Dragon Age series came out of the gate swinging. BioWare's classic was at the time their modern take on the CRPG genre. Dragon Age Origins gives you the option to play itself in two distinct manners. You can either zoom right out and play it like a classic CRPG like Baldur's Gate or Icewind Dale, or you can zoom in and play it as a singular character with the party's support, much like many other types of RPG. It was a game that preceded the modern revival of the CRPG genre. Games like Divinity Original Sin, Pillars of Eternity, and Baldur's Gate 3 were barely specks on the horizon, and came out to critical praise and success at the time. I'm happy to report that it's also aged very well from both a gameplay standpoint and with its gripping and fascinating storytelling. The Ultimate Edition comes with all of the game's extensive DLC content, including a full expansion in the form of Dragon Age Awakening, so it's absolutely worth its current sale price. This was a game that really deserved its second chance. Initially releasing after a very troubled development cycle, Kingdoms of Amalur: The Reckoning dropped across the globe in February 2012. It did moderately well with positive reviews, but not enough to recover from whatever was going on behind the scenes, and after releasing a couple of DLC packs, faded into the background. When the developer 38 Studios filed for bankruptcy shortly thereafter, it seemed like the final nail in the coffin for this IP. However, in 2018, THQ Nordic bought the rights to the property and, a short few years later, released Kingdoms of Amalur: Re-Reckoning, a remaster of the game featuring brand new content in the form of the Fatesworn DLC. This was the second chance the game needed, and I truly hope it'll be enough to eventually get a sequel, because the potential here is enormous. It's no secret that during the course of its turbulent development history, one point Kingdoms of Amalur was going to be an MMORPG, like World of Warcraft, but was eventually changed into the single-player game that it is today. However, much of the design philosophy of an MMO still remains to be seen. The quests are very reminiscent of the MMO standard, kill 10 of X, retrieve 5 of Y, etc, and the layout of the world map appears very much like the various different zones you'll encounter in many online games. Now, a single-player MMO is a phrase ne'er used in a positive light, so why am I sat here recommending it to you? because despite literally everything, there is a cracking game in here. It features an incredible meaty combat system, a fantastically flexible class system, allowing you to be any combination of warrior, mage or rogue, to mix and match them to your heart's content. The world is vast, with many different biomes, from your mystical forest to sprawling plains to marshlands and snowy mountains, with many different towns and settlements dotted around to explore. The major city hubs are really impressive too. This is what I mean when I say that the potential is enormous, because if these positive aspects of Amalur could be expanded upon in a sequel, without the troubled development cycle that the first game went through, a Kingdoms of Amalur 2 could be an instant classic. What Remains of Edith Finch is a walking simulator, with a runtime of about 2 hours, which still manages to stuff in several compelling plot lines, covering perhaps the most unfortunate family in America. It's a story about family, and a curse, whether real or simply a scapegoat, which hangs over the house that they live in. The stories told to you as you explore each room vary greatly in terms of substance and presentation, but the one thing they have in common is that they all end in death. I don't want to go any deeper than that, as this is a game that truly needs to be experienced in person, in one sitting ideally, but I will say that Lewis's story is a particular highlight. It's not a very long game, so the full price may be difficult to justify, but at its current sale value, it's definitely well worth the entry fee. Who here grew up playing such classics as Wipeout and F-Zero? Sadly, these franchises are conspicuously absent on PC, but fortunately there are alternatives available for the high-octane, anti-grav craving PC video game enthusiast like myself. Redout Enhanced Edition is currently one of the best options on the market. It has a fantastically tight control scheme, so despite soaring around the multitudinous selection of tracks at hundreds of miles per hour, you never don't feel in control of your vehicle. In true Wipeout fashion, it also contains numerous weapons and power-ups, both offensive and defensive, that can change the course of the race, which are assigned to your vehicle's inventory before the flag drops. It comes with a fair selection of tracks and a full campaign in which to enjoy them, and there's currently a lot of extra DLC available, featuring even more stunning locations to watch go by in a blur. Please note that there now is also a sequel available to this game, yet I have not personally played it, so I'm unable to offer any insight. I don't even know how to begin describing Katamari Damacy. It has one of the most uniquely bizarre concepts for a video game that I've ever seen. It's adorable and very fun in its execution, but the actual implications are pretty horrifying. In short, you're the prince of the universe, I suppose. Your father, the king of all cosmos, goes on a bit of a drunken bender and destroys all the stars in the sky. Somehow, it is now your responsibility to descend to Earth and acquire the materials the king needs to replace the stars before anybody notices. You acquire these materials by rolling around some kind of adhesive ball called a Katamari, which slowly gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you attach more construction materials. Did I mention those materials include animals, people, and even entire land masses? You truly get a sense of scale in Katamari Damacy ReROLL. In the first level, you'll be a tiny being, rolling around a living room picking up safety pins and matchboxes, yet by the final level, you'll be a nightmare the size of a skyscraper, rolling around entire islands and reaching the clouds that pass obliviously by above. It's also got a killer soundtrack. I have a question for you. Do you play video games to feel things? Because heck, To the Moon is going to make you feel things hard. Considering the size and scope of the game, produced by a single developer within the confines of RPG Maker, To the Moon is an utterly fantastic experience which blows many AAA games out of the water with its depth of writing and character. It's not a particularly long game at all, but it's as long as it needs to be, told in well-established chapters which document the various stages of the life of a dying man, whose only wish is to travel, well, to the moon. It did the rounds a few years ago when it came out, and it really blew people away with its solid premise and powerful execution. I couldn't recommend this indie classic more, but please do realise that there will be a few emotional gut punches along the way, so be sure to be in the right headspace before you give this a go. Neodori Forever makes me nostalgic for a place I've never been, for a time in which I never was. Running with a killer aesthetic, reminiscent of something found on the PlayStation 1, Neodori Forever is an outrun-like, horizon-chasing, arcade racing game. It's rather casual, as you don't even have to worry about accelerating, the game does that for you. However, Neodori Forever still finds ways to be challenging, with roads littered with rivals, obstacles, and coppers. There are several different modes available, from a lengthy campaign to nighttime driving, to a particularly challenging endless mode. Between its visual vibes, soundtrack, and accessible gameplay focused around drifting, Neodori Forever is perhaps one of the most chill arcade races available on Steam right now. Lonely Mountains Downhill is brutal. Lonely Mountains Downhill is unforgiving. Lonely Mountains Downhill is hilarious. One might even go so far as to call it the Dark Souls of enjoying a nice cycle through the countryside. It's not a particularly high-tech game, going for that low-poly aesthetic which is all the rage at the moment that I happen to love. Despite this, it still looks wonderful, perhaps due to its pairing with its amazing lighting engine, providing some gorgeous views for your poor cyclist to flail past helplessly, having tripped over that same rock on the road for the 15th time now. There's quite a lot of content here too, with several mountains available in the base game and then quite a few more available as paid or free DLC. Just be warned, you will fall off your bike on a multitude of occasions, but you will find it really funny. Okami HD is a charming Zelda-like game set in a semi-historical, fantastical version of Japan. In the land of Nippon, darkness has fallen, resulting in a realm almost entirely devoid of colour. It falls to you, the sun goddess Amaterasu, to defeat the legendary 8-headed demon responsible, Orochi, and return the land to happier times. To undertake this gargantuan task, Amaterasu inhabits the form of a white wolf, wielding a flaming disc and a paintbrush. It's this paintbrush that sets Okami apart, truly as a unique concept and video game. The paintbrush is one of your primary means of interacting with the world, be it to restore light and colour to certain areas or as a weapon in combat. When in battle, you can pause the action and literally paint the screen over certain enemies, pulling off devastating special attacks. Honestly, I'd argue Okami is worth the price of entry just for the setting alone, but considering what it then does with it, and how it does it, it makes this PS2 classic an absolute must-buy. Just be warned that the introduction to this game is story time. It runs on for a very long time in a lengthy exposition dump, to the point where you may start wondering if you're playing a visual novel. Fortunately, the pacing and interactivity picks up rapidly after the introductory segment. Art of Rally was a game that I was totally unable to put down until I'd completed everything that it had to offer. Every single event across all 5 parts of that lengthy campaign. For the following year or so, I jump on almost every single day to participate in the rotating online challenges. There's just something incredibly addictive about its moment-to-moment gameplay, as well as the nature of those challenges I talked about. One day I may actually crack the top 15% ranking I find myself bouncing off of again and again. Despite its almost Micro Machines-esque appearance, this is a fantastic, solid rally game, with a gorgeous low-poly aesthetic, the cars feeling weighty and responsive. It's also still in active development, with its Australia DLC dropping a mere few days ago. It's the perfect game to lose a few hours to going through the campaign, or simply to lose 5 minutes to, should you wish to hop on quickly to complete one challenge. Persona 5 Royal makes me want to be a better person, or a more productive one at the very least. Persona 5 Royal is the expanded version of Persona 5, a JRPG that released to critical acclaim back in 2018, but now with extra content and, in my opinion, essential quality of life improvements. I'll almost certainly be going into far more detail on Persona 5 Royal on this channel in future, but in short, this is a game about being a good student and productive member of society during the day, and a phantom thief at night, rooting out corruption and stealing hearts from the absolute worst that humanity has to offer. Set in modern-day Tokyo, primarily revolving around Shibuya, Persona 5 Royal is a roller coaster of a game with a seemingly infinite number of things to do, but with only an in-game year to do them. Persona 5 Royal is perhaps the longest game I'll recommend to you today, clocking in easily at over 100 hours, but is absolutely worth every last minute. Katana ZERO is one of the best executions of sheer delirium that I've ever seen in a video game. What happens when you're a hitman, hunting down all your targets all the while suffering the side effects of a powerful drug which displaces you in time? It's a game that needs to be played more than once to be truly understood, especially as it features branching dialogue choices which do affect how certain things play out within the story. It also simply has one of the coolest settings for a video game that I've seen in a long time. If you know anything about me or occasionally mosey on over to my Instagram, you'll have probably worked out that I'm very keen on the Outrun aesthetic, featuring a healthy dose of neon. The backup of the story, the neon-lit, rain-slicked dystopian city of New Mecca, provides a fantastic setting for the game, presented using some of the best pixel art that I've personally seen in a video game to date. Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc is frankly one of the most bizarre games I've ever played. Set in a mysterious school on total lockdown, with a stuffed teddy bear as a head teacher, Danganronpa comes out of the gate swinging with its premise and never lets up. This bear, Monokuma, informs the students that if they wish to leave, they'll have to murder a fellow classmate and, crucially, get away with it. One by one, the students start dropping like flies. Murdered. It falls to you and the remainder of your fellow students to solve each and every crime, else any one of you could be next. In gameplay, this translates to exploring every nook and cranny of the school, especially as more and more of it opens up to you as the game progresses, and finding evidence to present in court battles which culminate at the end of each case. Fans of Phoenix Wright, like myself, will be right at home here. It's primarily played as a visual novel, but also features extended segments in which you're allowed to wander freely around the school in first person. These sections are genuinely rather unnerving, highlighting the terrifying, oppressive atmosphere that the students find themselves in. I had a thrilling time unravelling the mystery of Hope's Peak Academy, and I'm sure that you will too. So here's the thing, I really like trains. I also like very chill experiences that you can mentally detox to after a long day. I also like voxel graphics and a charming lo-fi reminiscent soundtrack. Wouldn't you know, Station to Station caters to all three of these hyper-specific needs of mine. I had initially picked up Station to Station expecting something similar to Railway Empire or Railroad Tycoon, but it is in fact a bit closer to something like Train Valley or Islanders. It's more puzzle game than Tycoon, focusing more on strategic placements of certain tracks and stations over actually running a transport business. Whilst this may not initially sound like what you're looking for, consider giving it a look. It's genuinely rather good for the soul. This game surprised the heck out of me. Even though it's almost a brand new release, without the steepest discount, I find myself simply having to recommend it as soon as possible. Wandering Sword is a JRPG style video game from Chinese developer The Swordman Studio. When I first encountered Wandering Sword, I was incredibly intrigued by its art style, which is clearly very inspired by HD 2D, most famously used in Octopath Traveler. However, despite its visual similarities, it's a very different game with a criminally underutilized setting. Chinese mythology and folklore, and wuxia in particular, is a rich, fantastical inspiration for a video game. Wandering Sword features that beautiful HD 2D rendition of ancient China, with 70 plus locations to explore across 5 different biomes. The combat has incredible depth, featuring a grid-based arena system which can be played in turns or real time. There are 5 different kinds of weapon-based martial arts to master, with multiple recruitable party members to share the adventure with. I just want to give a final quick shout out to the writing and quest design. I've not finished the main story quite yet, but have thoroughly enjoyed what I've seen of it so far, and have also been thoroughly impressed by the side stuff. In a year that's been packed with fantastic RPG releases, this one may have genuinely stood out to me the most so far. If you're waiting for a later sale and a steeper discount, that's cool, but at the very least, Wandering Sword is certainly one for you to watch. And that brings us to the end of my recommendations for this year's Steam Autumn Sale. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you want to see a few more deals, feel free to check out my Steam Summer Sale video. There may be some applicable games there too. And if you want to see more of my regular work, please feel free to check out my latest Katamari Damacy review, Having a Mosey. With all that said, thank you very much once more, and I'll see you next time.